If you look online and research breastfeeding, you'll begin to find a plethora or an abundance of information supporting the notion of how important it is to breastfeed your newborn, to create that bond between mother and child, and it is well accepted through all the data that you'll find. But if we start talking about the resources that are available, the education that is available, or the help that is available to all mothers in all communities, you'll begin to start seeing a very different story. Minority women have lower breastfeeding rates than those of white women. Women of color, especially Black women, are more likely to return to work before 12 weeks because of the need to work, and more likely than not, they're working hours that are not flexible. This makes it difficult to create a schedule for breastfeeding your child, or simply just to pump breast milk. According to a CDC study, hospital maternity wards that serve larger Black populations are less likely to help Black women initiate breastfeeding after giving birth or offer lactation support following delivery. Often, staff in these facilities instead offer Black babies formula. So in a nutshell, in communities that are highly populated by Black and brown people, the women and mothers in those communities do not benefit from or do not have access to resources and education and help in regards to lactation and breastfeeding, and so they just simply do not do that. These discrepancies need to be addressed. And you can find a lot more information online. This one simply was a PBS NewsHour article posted back in 2019. I'll put the link for this article in the description below for those that want to continue reading it. A lot of disparities in regards to breastfeeding amongst women of color. Today's guest, Norma Vazquez, addresses this with a passion to provide the resources, to provide the education, to provide the help to women of color to breastfeed their child. And her journey on how she came to this point is what we're going to hear about today. So I'm happy that you're here. Let's get started. This is Norma's journey, and these are
the Journeyman Chronicles.
Welcome back to the Journeyman Chronicles. My name is Felix C. Arroyo. Hopefully by now you already know that, but just in case you're new to what we do, my name is the Journeyman, and I'm bringing you the Journeyman Chronicles. How have you been? How's your 2 weeks been since the last time we talked? I'm doing pretty good. I'm kind of getting tired of the weather unable to make up its mind. As a matter of fact, as I'm recording this right now, I'm looking out my window. It's snowing. Snowing on a Saturday here in freaking March. But you know what? My gut is telling me that this is the last snow of the season. I'm no weatherman, but I'm just saying. Something's telling me we're going to be grilling out pretty soon. We're going to have some drinks out by the fireplace. You know how it is around this time of year. Get out to the parks, take your kids out, wear them out. So by the time 7 o'clock in the evening rolls around, they're showered, they're getting tired, they can go to bed. You can sit, you can chill, you can relax. Trust me, I know the routine. Please don't take this like I am not loving my children. I love my children. I'm just saying. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And my wife does most of it. It's the patience Alexandra has with all the kids. Good God. I don't know if I have the energy to take them to the park to wear out energy. You know what I mean? Anyway, we are getting ready for episode 23 of the Journeyman Chronicles. This week, I get to share with you my interview with Norma Vazquez. Norma is a lactation consultant. She specializes in breastfeeding. This is something she got passionate about because of her own experience nursing as a first-time mom. She is also the business owner of Mamá La Lechera, which offers support and education for moms, especially women of color. She's a lactation activist. She's very, very proud of that. She's also offering baby clothes 0 to 6 months. She's designing them and getting them sold. I'll put the link for that in the description of this episode. So there's a lot going on here with Norma. She is a busy woman, a proud Latina, and a business owner. So let's get right into it. But before we do, I want to give a little context to some things here. My goal in this podcast is to try to give a platform for anybody to share their story. And Norma was no exception. I was honored to have her on the show, and I'm glad that I did, because the whole point of this podcast, like I said, is to not only give people a platform for them to share their story, but also to allow some transparency and allow people to be vulnerable. This also includes myself. And I had a moment during this interview with Norma where I sounded like an idiot, and I'll just put that bluntly. And the opportunity was there for me to learn, and Norma was very, very gracious and educated me. And, we're going to get to that towards the end of this episode. I want you to keep track and pay attention, because there's a moment where I'm a little confused about the understanding of breastfeeding and body feeding and chest feeding and what the differences are. And I'm sounding like a very naive person, but Norma, like I said, answered me. And as she begins to give me her answer, the light bulb goes off. Now, why am I bringing this up now? I'm bringing this up now because I'm trying to be as vulnerable as possible myself. And I feel that if I'm going to offer a platform for people to share their stories and for all of us to listen and learn about one another, then I should at least share my experiences of how I had a preconceived idea that was false, or a misunderstanding that was very naive. And instead of editing out the goof moment that I had, I left it in the interview so that you can all understand. And maybe you weren't understanding what that meant, and now you do because of my blunder. So there's that, right? Listen, I'm all about transparency, and I'm all about getting right to it. So let's just do that. This is Norma's Journey. Episode 23 of the Journeyman Chronicles starts right now. Hi, Norma.
Hi, how are you?
Not bad. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Nice to meet you.
Okay, nice to meet you.
Jazzy and Jose got me hip to you. And the irony was I was already kind of aware of what you were doing since I started the podcast. I've been kind of like exploring what people are doing in the area and kind of, learning about them. And when Jazzy and Jose told me about you, I was like, that name sounds familiar. And then when I looked you up on Facebook, I was like, oh, yeah. So nice to meet you. Thank you for doing the interview. Looking you up, I can understand that you're very passionate about breastfeeding. And the cool thing about that is that my wife and I, we have two girls. My wife and I have 4 children total, but my wife and I have 2 little girls. And the last 2 times that I've been in Women's and Babies Hospital with my wife having our daughters was the first time that I've ever experienced a lactation nurse come in and go through the whole procedure. And so I thought that was pretty cool because, 20 years ago when I became a dad for the first time, I never experienced that. And I'm speaking as a man. Obviously, I can only do so much. So talk to me about how this came about in your life, and what was it about breastfeeding that caught your attention?
Yeah, so I have a similar experience. I have 2 older daughters, 17 and 15, and back then I delivered at Women and Babies. When I had them, I didn't get any support, any kind of lactation support. And I always think back, not until I started working in lactation did I really think about my own experience with my first daughter. And it seems so foreign to me now, to think about it and be like, wow, that's really what I experienced. And, I always think back, and breastfeeding was very different back then. My only memories of breastfeeding was breastfeeding in a room by myself. Or if we were in the restaurant, I would be in the car. Right. And she was born in the dead middle of summer. So I'd be sweating in the car with this baby crying and just trying to, to breastfeed her. And, I remember like I had to go back to work. I was a young mom. And so I had to go back to work, within like those like 3 months. And I remember getting this big box. Like I remember like somebody, I don't even know where I got this box from, but it was a big box and it was something called a pump. And I had no idea what it was, how to use it. Like I knew that it was to take milk out, but I had no idea how like at all how to use it. So I never used it. And I went to formula, like as soon as I went back to work, like she went to formula. And that's my experience with that, like I didn't have nurses come in my room or somebody like trying to like educate me on it. So yeah. And so, so much happened from then till like when I started lactation about 4 or 5 years ago. I completely like, changed careers and just kind of did something because somebody saw how I advocated online and they were like, whoa, you think, I think you'd be good at this. And I'm like, all right, that sounds cool. Let me try. And I ended up falling in love with it. So.
Oh, wow. So your children had already been grown and for some time when you decided to do this. This wasn't something that you started early on. It was just something that you advocated for online.
Yeah. So, like I said, I have 2 older girls. My first like career, I worked at the clinic, which used to be called Southeast Clinic. They've changed names a couple more times since then, but I worked in health informatics. And so I was, behind the computer all the time. And that was, just something that like, I started working as like a receptionist and just kind of like made my way up to this to my position, and it ended up being my career.
Okay.
My husband, I met my husband when my girls were, I don't know, maybe like 12 years ago. I forget how old they were. Okay. But he was.
It's what happens when you become a parent. You just start losing
I know, like sometime before then. Yeah. So we, I met my husband. We got married, and he was stationed in San Antonio for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And his last year there, I ended up getting pregnant, and we were trying. And so, I ended up deciding just to be a stay-at-home mom. And, I, essentially just like left my career behind and became a stay-at-home mom for the next 2 years. And it was a completely different experience in every way possible from when I had the girls. It was completely different. I was older, I was in my 30s, and it's just different, like
it's a completely different experience. Yeah, you have a lot more patience. You kind of know
so much more patience.
Yeah.
So much more. You're just like, oh, you throw a tantrum. Like, let's talk about it.
My wife and I, we talk about that often because 3 years ago when my daughter Chloe was born, our first, it was my wife's first time. And it was, and it was also like my first time being a parent again in 12 years. Because at that time, my youngest was 12. And everything kind of came right back to me. And there were times where my wife was like, sometimes even now she'll lose a little patience with my 3-year-old because my 3-year-old's like 3 going on 33. And it's just like, I'm just like, babe, it's all right. But I remember you kind of like recall the first time around, like, man, I remember losing my mind, and now you're able to kind of just breeze through it a little bit. So it's a kind of a blessing in a way. I get to like relive it and make up for things that I wish I would have done a little differently with my first 2. But so you've got you have with your husband, you have more children or no? Yeah, you do.
Yeah. So we're switched. I had 2 from my previous relationship, and then he came in with none. So
okay, I see. So he left. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say he left Lancaster as a 17-year-old kid, and then came back married with 2 kids and 1 on the way.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with coming back with a family. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
A family of 4, or how many children do you have with?
We have 3. So no, we have there's 2 girls. We have 3 girls.
3 girls.
One together, and then 2 older. So there's 5 of us here.
So there's all girls in the house. Talk to me about. This is what I'm really, really excited about, is because Mamá La Lechera. This is something that I've never seen before, and of course, I'm sure if I was a woman, I would be more hip to this, especially mothers. That I don't know much about this being a man, but is it common to have something like this? What you're doing, you're creating a platform where minorities or Latinas and people of color can mothers can come, and are you sharing information? Are you offering help? Talk to me about what you're doing here.
Yeah, so I'm not like strictly inclusive, so I don't turn away money. So
Okay.
if you want to hire me, you can hire me. But it's not it sadly it's not the norm to have a Latina that has a lactation business. It's just not the norm.
Yeah.
The lactation world is very white, and it's been white,
Yeah.
but like in our history here in this country, it's a white world,
Yeah.
and it's if you have a lactation consultant coming to see you in the hospital, like that, it's a white woman.
Sure.
That really was kind of thrown in my face when I accepted the position. I work for LGH. That's my 9 to 5 job.
Okay.
I started working for them as a peer counselor. They decided to do this like pilot program, and they wanted to increase duration rates and initiation rates of women who are breastfeeding, and specifically women of color who are breastfeeding. So they hired these 2 peer counselors, myself and another girl, to kind of come in and just support these moms, and really supporting as in just kind of like calling them after they delivered or before they delivered, doing breastfeeding classes, and so it was me and this Blanca, and I always, like, when we always came back at the end of the day, like we would talk about how like our home visits went, because we actually go into these people's homes, and I always had like more to tell, and it became very clear to me that these women were more open to talking to me because I looked like them, because they knew I was raised here in town in the city, and I am a Latina, and so it was like just by me walking in their door, there was this wall coming down. This, they knew like right away, okay, this woman's not here to judge me, like she's here to help me. And through that, I was able to just hear so many stories and just so many of their experiences, whether that's their experience with, in their family, or, how their labor and delivery went, or how their time in couplet care went. And, more times often than not, it wasn't a great story. And it was, they felt judged, or they didn't even get a chance to do what they wanted to do, or they didn't feel heard. And, the more I heard it, the more I just kind of started like digging around and doing research and just kind of like what's going on in this world. And, and then that is when my own experience from 17, 18 years ago kind of came flooding back in.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, like, wow, like that's not how I should have been treated, or I should have gotten help, or I should have known what that big box was and how to use it, And that's really where Mamá La Lechera was birthed from. And I was just like, I knew that I wanted to do something for Latinas and for women of color, but I just didn't know how.
One of the first things I was thinking of when you were talking was the communication barrier, especially for Latina women who are unable to communicate with a lactation nurse that is white or doesn't speak Spanish. And it also dawned on me, like, before you're doing this, and you even alluded to thinking back 17 years ago, we can think back even generations before, how many women of color that are Latina that weren't able to communicate, fully understand the situation that we're in. It's actually, it hurts my heart to think that here are first-time mothers that have no idea what to do, and they're not getting the education, but they're also not even aware that they're not getting the education. Like you even alluded, you didn't know until 17 years later things started clicking, and that's cool that you're finally able to get it, but it's a shame that you were in that position. And so I'm sure that fueled you at the time to get the ball rolling. Right. What kind of services do you offer or education? Like, tell me about what it is that you're actually doing with Mamá La Lechera.
Yeah, so we're doing a couple of different things. I launched with the initiative to diversify the lactation field. So we were able to raise money like through our community. And it was, I tried applying for grants, but I'm not nonprofit. I am an LLC. And it was really hard for me, like I kept on getting turned down for grants. And I knew that I wanted to provide training to educate women of color in our community to become certified in breastfeeding. So that, because I can't do it all by myself here, right? So like we need to diversify this group of women and birthing people, right?
Right.
I remember having a conversation with a really good friend of mine, Tanae, and she was like, girl, just put it out there. Like, you just put it out there to everybody that and they will show up. And literally, like, that's what I did. I posted online and I said, look, this is what I want to do. I need to raise this amount of money. And I kid you not, 3 days later, we had more than that. It was amazing. And so currently right now we have, including myself, because I took the course too, but there's like 11 women that are, and people that are taking the course through Lactation Education Resources. So at the end of their training, they will be certified breastfeeding specialists. And that includes their testing as well and their credentials.
Is that because of Mamá La Lechera that they became interested in this field? That's got to be an awesome feeling.
It is. It's kind of like surreal, I don't put too much thought into it. It's yeah.
But the fact that you created though a platform where people felt comfortable enough to make that leap. I mean, who knows what they would have done had they not had that. I think that's worthy enough to note out and applaud you for. That's very, very cool.
Thank you. I think it's important to know that, like, I'm almost 40 and I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up.
Absolutely.
I think that that's okay, like, and I think we need to normalize that a little bit more, like it's cool if you want to start something up, it's cool if you want to do it and you don't know how to do it, just do it, and just kind of figure it out as you're doing it. So yeah, I'm just thankful to be in this space.
I totally dig it. I'll be 43 and I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing. Hence the podcast is what I'm trying to baby right now because I love doing it. Are you also into photography? Because I see that also. Talk to me about that, because is that something that you've been doing passionately also, or yeah?
Oh my God, yeah. I've been into photography since I think I got my first camera when I was in middle school, like back in my Lincoln days. I got my first Fuji film. And I grew up in high school. I took computer photography and I made this little portfolio and I walked into Co-Camera downtown. Not many people know about that space anymore, but I was like, this is my portfolio. Like, I want to work for you. And the owner back in the day, Matt, was like, called me the next day and he was like, yeah, I'll hire you. And I was like, really? And so, I throughout high school, I worked there and ran their lab and worked there for actually a few years. And photography was like everything to me. In my 20s, I had, there was a couple studios I had, and I used to do weddings, and I, did some photography for La Voz, and I used to be their photographer.
Oh, wow.
Like it really was like such a huge part of my life for so long. And then it became a job, and it became, something that just felt like work, and then the iPhones came out, and and I started leaving the camera at home, and I just recently, like within the past, like I say since my daughter was probably born, I started picking up the camera again, and I'll do some photography here and there, but it's not as huge as as it used to be. Still a love of mine, but yeah.
I totally dig it. I used to draw. I mean, I do love to draw, and I haven't. It became like a chore, and I think ever since I felt that feeling, I just stopped. The last thing I ever drew was a picture of my wife, which I love doing, but with everything going on in my life, I was always like, oh, I gotta I got to get this done. I got to get that done. And then it became a project that I needed to wrap up as opposed to something that was passionate. But I totally understand it. And when I was going through your Instagram page, all your pictures have that matted border. It gives the whole look a pretty unique look, which is something you don't usually see. So I'm hopefully it's something that you don't stop doing. Have you ever found like the itch to just pull it out and take a snap here and there and mess around, or is it completely out of the...
Oh no, I use it for Mamá La Lechera, like I wanted to, it was really important for me that if I was going to put something out there, that I wanted it to be professional. Like I didn't, and not that I judge anything like on how anybody else does things, but I really wanted this look. And when I launched my website, I wanted it to be like, damn.
Yeah.
And I couldn't afford someone to do my website, so I did my own website, but I wanted to get like my logo and my branding done, and that was really important to me. And but I also was like, well, I can't take that money from my family. You know what I'm saying? Like I can't take money from our household. So I went right back to Facebook and I was like, who wants some photo shoots? Like, like, and I did that. And that's really where the money came from. I was able to fund my logo and branding. When COVID happened, I did porch pictures, and we were able to raise like thousands of dollars for the food hub and a couple of other organizations in the city. And it's just amazing how people just show up, and I was able to then, I also was able to do something that I really, really loved and missed doing. So yeah, I definitely still pull it out.
Wanting to do something passionately and making sure that it's done efficiently. Those are strengths of somebody that wants to do something big. Usually when you have an idea and you're not really sure how to go about it, the end product speaks for itself. Everything I'm seeing so far with Norma, with her website for Mamá La Lechera, and the content that she has there and how it's presented and the information she's offering, you can tell she's very passionate about this. Her experience helped fuel her passion for this. Being young and having to deal with firstborn, not sure how to breastfeed, and pretty much realizing years later when she's confronted with the barriers that women of color that are mothers are dealing with, she's then recalling her own memories. That's usually how things get done when you are passionate, when you are fueled by experience. I appreciate when she talks about, and she continues to talk about, the experience that women of color that are mothers deal with in this world where predominantly white people are unaware of what they could be experiencing. We're clearly not trying to suggest that all white people are a problem in this area. It's more so a lack of understanding and education and empathy. And I think Norma recognized that and wanted to get in hands first and do what she could do because she saw the gap and she was trying to bridge it. This is the kind of stuff that I love to talk about because we can learn a lot from one another from these experiences. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break, but when I come back, Norma and I continue to get into the breastfeeding culture, and I share with Norma, my wife and I, our story of dealing with the difficulty of breastfeeding. We have had this conversation of what it's like to be supportive of breastfeeding and the pros of breastfeeding, but talking about and experiencing difficulties trying to breastfeed, women that are going through that. And my wife asked me to share this with Norma, and so I did. So we get into that. We get into her clothing line for babies, cute little clothes, and her inspiration for that. We get into explaining the differences between body feeding and breastfeeding, or chest feeding and breastfeeding. And of course, my blunder leads to this. So I hope that you appreciate this. Quick break. We'll be right back. I wanna ask this question, and I briefly brought it up with you when I had introduced myself. When we talk about women that are lactating and breastfeeding, the push is to get women aware of what they're able to do or in their first mothers, and give them that independent vibe to take care and nurture their child. Talk to me about your perspective on how women are, I'm trying to find how to word this, because this is, my wife wanted me to ask this question. This is why I'm trying to make sure I do this the right way. It's a very sensitive subject.
Yeah.
But my wife was having a difficult time breastfeeding both times. And she was feeling like she was failing because the push is there from everybody, the nurses, from the gate, and she can't. Is that something that you focus on as well? Or is there any talk about women that are having a hard time breastfeeding, and the social push that may be making them feel like they're failing as mothers? How do we handle that, especially as a husband who is trying to, I have no idea what to do, and I'm sure most men feel the same way. We kind of feel helpless, and it takes a toll mentally. Can we talk about that and get your perspective on that?
Yeah, that's probably what I'm most passionate about. We have this idea and that, we're so worried about these babies, right? Like even our house, even Women and Babies is baby friendly, right? Making sure that these babies are fed, making sure that these babies are gaining weight, these babies, and nobody's thinking about the moms,
Right.
And I truly believe with all my heart that moms have to be first. Like, yeah, babies are important, and we're gonna get there, but like if mom's not taken care of, that baby's not going to be taken care of. And I feel like that is the missing part, is that nobody's worried about these moms. And yeah, there's so many benefits to breastfeeding, but you know what? Reality is breastfeeding is not for everybody, and breastfeeding can look very different for everybody. And so I always, like when I meet when I meet a mom for the first time, like before I even talk about what she's going through, like, what she needs help with, I always say, like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? And then I always follow up with, well, like, how can I help you? Like, what is your goal? Like maybe her goal isn't even to latch her baby. Maybe she just wants to pump for a couple of days. And that's okay. Like, and I feel like we need to, focus on moms, support them, and everything else will kind of like fall into place, but it can be really intimidating, and a really kind of like lonely and scary place, because you do see the push, and I'm just talking about breastfeeding, but like you do see it everywhere, and especially in the hospital, and you got nurses coming in, the lactation coming in, and everybody's asking you, and then like you ask for help, and then they're trying to like push this baby onto you, and like and the mom just gave birth, like she's exhausted. So yeah, I think definitely like we need to improve on that. We have to get down to, and not only like what's going on then, but there's a reason why Latinas don't really breastfeed here in America. There's a reason why Black women don't breastfeed, or as much as, like why their numbers are the lowest among women of color. Like there's history there, and it's really important to understand that history and to go into that room judgment free, because you're not going to get anywhere if you don't.
Yeah, I know that postpartum depression is something that a lot of mothers deal with after giving birth. But what I wasn't aware of was watching my wife really go through a depressional state simply because she wasn't able to lactate, or the babies just weren't, nothing was working, and there was a lot of bleeding and a lot of taking care of herself, and I could just see the frustration on her, and it was like no matter what, I couldn't really say anything at that time to snap her out of that, because that's a completely understandable state. And so I appreciate you saying that, because you're right. It's almost as if we become robots we got to get the baby taken care of. And you're absolutely right. But my wife is exhausted, and I don't know obviously I can't breastfeed the baby. I'm trying my best unless I can. Do men do that? I mean, I'm looking at your I'm looking at when I'm looking at Mamá La Lechera, and I'm seeing breastfeeding. I'm seeing body feeding. I'm seeing
body and chest feeding, right?
Yeah. Explain that. Is that what's the difference between the three?
We're just honoring how how people live their lives. And there are people who body feed, and there are people who chest feed, and there are people who breastfeed. So I definitely want Mamá La Lechera to be a welcoming space, and so I really try that. And when I say mamas, and I always say mamas, or moms,
Sure.
I really want it to be known that is inclusive of everybody. Not everybody who lactates identifies as a woman, or identifies as a mom.
Gotcha.
And that's really cool. I did want to go back to really quick what you were saying about Latinas, and it is important to know that Latinas do have one of the highest rates of postpartum depression. And research has shown that breastfeeding, helps to decrease that. And what you said was I didn't know what to do. But you were her support. And that's really what's missing, is that support system. And most of us, we weren't breastfed. And, and some of us, I know my mom's the first, I'm second generation. So, she was also born here in the States. She wasn't breastfed. So you're talking about over 60 years that breastfeeding hasn't been present in my family. And what that does to me and to those that came before me, and even those that came after me, is that there's no support there. If when I got lactation support, I wasn't getting it from my mom, from my abuela, from my tias, because nobody breastfed. And that's really important to understand when dealing with any culture. I'm a Latina, so I speak for Latinas. That's really important to understand. And if you don't understand that, and you come in a room and you're like, why is this woman getting frustrated? Why doesn't she just breastfeed her baby? She ain't got nobody to go home to call and be like, hey, come over and help me with this, or am I doing this right? And she doesn't have anyone saying, you know what, you're doing a great job. Your baby's fine. Again, there's so much more that goes into it than just, breastfeeding your baby.
Yeah.
So
Thank
sorry.
you. No, thank you. Thank you for taking us back to that. I'm glad that you said that, because I think also women of color and Latinas hearing a Latina woman say that means a lot. And so I'm hoping that this will make that impact. So thank you very much for sharing that. In regards to talk to me about the clothing line, the little baby clothing line that you got going. You got these cute little babies dressed up in beanies and jumpers. They look adorable. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So it's another idea that I'm working on from Mamá La Lechera. It started with, I need to bring in revenue, right? Because I'm offering these services, and sometimes for free, so I have to, make money somewhere. So I figured, let me just start selling some baby and maternity and postpartum items to just kind of offset that cost. And it's what started off as something online is now a store, a little vendor space up in Mannheim at the Prussian Street Arcade. And just, slowly growing that and hopes that I can branch off into my own space and have a space that women and birthing people can go to get breastfeeding support. And then if they want, kind of shop on the side as well. But that's what I'm working at. and this, so it's just kind of the beginning of what's to come, hopefully.
But
Yeah.
what do you see in the future in regards to that? What do you like? What kind of how are you going to branch out the clothing line? Are you going to have full outfits with the shoes and or are we sticking to like the?
No,
The
I honestly, I want a retail space. So I want a space that would have retail. When you think about like what's available, like, there's not really any kind of stores specific only like for maternity and postpartum.
yeah.
And that's really what I want to address. But I also within that store want to address breastfeeding and just parent support. Like I would love to have a space to like hold a class or like a support, a couple like different support groups, or like I would love that, because just going back to when I was a mom, there's nothing around, and if there is around, you're going into a room full of white women.
Yeah.
And I say that with like please, like I like to your listeners, it's not that there's anything wrong with that, but we also need to be supported by other Latinas, by other women of color. It's just part of life, and I think we're all kind of getting sick of it looking one way, and this is the way to change it. So I really would love an inclusive space like that. So that's what I'm working on.
No, I don't. Thank you for saying that, and I completely understand. I think it's important to feel free and express what you're saying, because it's very true. When you want to look for a place that's inclusive, it's because you're used to feeling like you're not there, or that it's how do I say this? The standard is more so the white standard, and I completely understand what you're saying. And, my goal obviously with this podcast is like, I would love to have an episode just focused on that so we can break that down. But anyway, that's a different story, but thank you.
Do it.
Thank you so much. No, because it's like, these are conversations that I think a lot of people have no problem talking about in general open spaces, but when we start going into these certain categories and we're talking about breastfeeding and this specific little avenue here, we can talk about just that within this, and those are the things that I would like to break. Is those people afraid to mention these things because they don't want to be looked at as one way or the other. It's true. When you have women that are of color, that they experience a whole different world than white women do. And when you have first-time mothers, like we alluded to and talked about earlier, that have a hard time with the communication barrier, there's a lot of women that just give up and don't want to get into it because of that communication barrier, and they just lose out on so much information. So I love seeing, especially Latinos and Latinas, I love seeing people do what they're doing and making a difference and an impact and giving to the community. And everything that you're doing right now screams community. What's do you have a vision that for the future of where you want to take this, or are you just going to keep riding it out, how it's going, and enjoy the ride?
I think a little bit of both. I would have never thought that that my little Instagram account that I created 2 years ago would be getting recognized as a business and as a community support system. That was always like a dream of mine, but I never could even like verbalize that 3 years ago. So yeah, just I just wake up and I work a little bit at it every day. And, I think the future would be just to like expand and be able to have a space that people can come to like whenever they need to, I really want to take it offline and really bring it into like, one-on-one and in person to person and really create community, like I think it's important to meet other parents and I just I find a lot of my support in other women in other couples, as far as like my husband and I, and we find support in other couples, and I think that's what creates community, meeting new people. And
Awesome. Thank you so much for hanging out and breaking this down for me and sharing your journey. I think I think what you're doing is, like I said, I know earlier you didn't kind of want to say that you were responsible for these people seeing what you were doing and being inspired. But the truth is that when people see what you're doing and they're inspired, then you should be aware of that. And so I tip my hat off to you. Thank you very much for joining me, for sharing your journey. I hope that I can make you proud and share your story for you as soon as I do this.
Thank you so much. No, thank you. Like, seriously, thank you. And congratulations on your podcast. And, that's also very exciting to see. So, please keep on sharing the stories. There's so many out there. Just thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Norma Vazquez. I appreciate it. Go get some rest. I know it's getting late. I appreciate it. See ya.
See ya.
Shout out to Norma Vazquez for everything that she's doing with Mamá La Lechera, creating a space for BIPOC to support each other in our journey of mamahood. I'm reading that on this beautiful website that she's got here. It's nicely done. There's a link right here for lactation services. You should check it out. It's spelled MAMALALECHERA.com. For BIPOC, which stands for Black and Indigenous People of Color. This is a great platform to give the women that we were discussing this podcast a space to learn and a platform to share journeys with each other. There's also a link here where you can go to the store. We talked about, the cute little baby clothes. It's called Hello World by Mamá La Lechera. This is for expectant and postpartum mamas and birthing persons for the babies that are 0 to 6 months. It's exclusively at Prussian Street Arcade. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is located in Manheim, 49 North Main Street, Manheim, Pennsylvania. So check that out. Check the website out. Please follow Mamá La Lechera for more information, because she's periodically sharing these beautiful pictures of these cute little babies in clothes, and also the journeys and the stories of the people that are helping out. So I had a blast doing this, and I know I've said this already, but I've learned a lot. When we talk about breastfeeding or chest feeding or now body feeding, we're talking about a term that is used by people who don't identify their anatomy with the term breast. Some people prefer to say chest feeding and some say body feeding. It's often used as a way for transgender and non-binary parents to describe how they feed and nurture their babies. So once again, I learned this. It makes sense that I said the light bulb went off. Learning moment for me, but it makes sense. So I appreciate you allowing me to put that out there, to put my blunder out there as a learning moment, and I'm sharing it with you. Once again, thank you, Norma, for joining me on the Chronicles. I wish you well in your future endeavors. As for the rest of you, I will see you when I see you. I may be releasing a wrap up for this episode. I'm not sure. And this is me, right? No one knows what to do with me because I don't know what I'm doing with me. I got some things in the mix here, and I'm not sure if I should let anybody know. So I'm going to wait and sit on it. Some big things happening for me. You will find out soon enough. One thing I do know for sure is that the next interview is already locked and loaded, and I'll be ready to present that to you in 2 weeks. Until then, I hope you guys have a great day, great evening. Remember, maintain focus and stay continuous through all 4 seasons. My name is Felix C. Arroyo. I am the Journeyman, and these are the Journeyman Chronicles. Y'all be safe.